Welcome into episode 1 of Wicked Awesome Nintendo, your bi-weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Scott Creamer. You can find Wicked Awesome Nintendo on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. This week, Nintendo finally fully revealed the Nintendo Switch 2 in all its glory. Here to help me dig through all the news of the Direct is my co-host, Shane Hibbard. Shane, what's going on today?
Hey, Scotty, how are we?
Doing pretty
Nintendo
good.
Switch 2. Oh no.
Oh no. We finally, yep. 2 seconds in and we're talking over each other. That's that's
All
that's
right.
that's what happens when you record a podcast over the internet, so
That's very true. Switch 2 is here though. Let's talk about it. Let us talk about it.
yeah, we've been waiting for it feels like centuries for this thing to finally get fully revealed. A lot of people expected something next gen from Nintendo for years now, and, it finally got revealed in January with a short teaser that the video was about 2.5 minutes, I think. Sort of like a high level overview of what the system was, and then it gave us the promise of yes, there's going to be a full blown Nintendo Direct in April to completely reveal the system, all the specs. Well, maybe not all the specs because Nintendo doesn't like to really go deep into specs of their systems, but uh, enough specs to keep people satisfied to find out what the system is capable of. And then, of course, they revealed the launch lineup of games. But Shane, how did you feel about that Nintendo Direct? Just high level thoughts of what went on there.
Yeah, I was super excited. Um I thought that overall it went really well if we're talking about the presentation and the direct and the lineup they had and the detail they went into for a first look, for a first hour. Um I came away really impressed.
Yeah, admittedly, I watched the Direct and I was kind of like, that's it in a sense. And then I went back and I watched it again. I was like, okay, there's actually like a lot of meat on this bone. Um, let's dive into sort of the specs of the system, the features, and all that first. So Nintendo during the direct, they revealed that the Nintendo Switch 2 has a 7.9-inch LCD screen. There's theories out there that it could be a mini LED panel, which is sort of exciting.
That is.
Um, 120 hertz refresh rate, which was totally out of left field, unexpected. I don't think really anybody expected that at all. HDR handheld and docked, 4K upscaling when docked. The Joy-Con are magnetically snapped onto the side of the system. The Joy-Con also includes mouse functionality for certain games. There's the C button, which was theorized for months. What exactly the C button could be, it actually is something a little less exciting. It's just a chat button. So all these people who made all these theory videos, I'm sure were sorely disappointed when it was just a chat button.
But for
Uh,
Nintendo, that was a big deal.
no, it's huge because
It is big.
people have been asking for chat with Nintendo systems for years. So the fact that we finally have a way to chat on a Nintendo system is exciting. So,
Agreed.
256 gigabytes of internal storage. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's enough for now, or do you think that they could have gone a little heavier on the storage? What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's okay. Um I think that it's all going to come down to what do the file sizes look like for some of these third party games,
Right.
and are they able to condense down if it's 100 gigs for each third party game, then sure, obviously that's going to be an issue, and I'm sure there's going to be outliers. But I think overall, with the way that Nintendo can optimize what they have for their first party games, and just kind of what we've seen on um, some other some other handhelds and file sizes being smaller, um, I I think it's gonna be okay. I mean, it's certainly an upgrade from the 64 gigs that we've got now on the Switch 1 OLED, so
Yep.
I'm happy with it. Um,
Yeah,
I think it'll be just fine.
256 doesn't seem too terrible when you take into consideration the file sizes of Nintendo games. They're usually on the smaller size. I mean, even Mario Kart World, they're saying it comes in at about 20 gigs, which is the largest Nintendo game to date. But I mean, all things considered, that is a pretty small game compared to modern gen games. So yeah, 20 gigs. If you could fit if you're strictly buying Nintendo games and indie games like a lot of people did last generation with the Switch One. Um, 256, yeah, I feel like that's fine.
If you can get 15 to 20, I'm not playing 15 to 20 games at a time, so
No, no, no,
I'm
no.
okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're downloading something like I'm sure like Warzone's gonna come to the Switch too, and Apex Legends and stuff like that, that are meteor with their file sizes. So if you're downloading games like that, obviously it's gonna eat up a lot of your storage. But um, if you're strictly Nintendo first party and indie games, I think you're fine there.
And I think that my only last comment is if you had to cut down somewhere, I wouldn't have wanted to sacrifice any of these other specs that we just mentioned to get more storage space. I'd rather cut down on that space to get these other specs for the price they were looking for.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree. Um, It's got a the you can also expand your storage with micro SD express cards. The old micro SD cards are not compatible with the Switch 2. So you're gonna have to fork up a little bit of extra money if you want the added storage. And then it also supports 3D audio, which is a good touch. The PlayStation 5 has the 3D audio. I don't know if the Xbox does. I don't play on Xbox, so I have no idea. But the 3D audio is a nice touch. But with all the specs of the Nintendo Switch 2, how are you feeling about the system overall?
I mean, the biggest call out was what you said, the 120 hertz refresh rate absolutely caught me by surprise. We know Switch One had 60 hertz, and I was really thinking that this was if we were going to see any kind of a bump, and I wasn't sure we even were going to in the refresh rate department. I was thinking maybe 90, like maybe
Mm.
they were going to push to where Steam Deck was, and that was going to be an improvement. Um, 120 is fantastic. Really, that's the biggest takeaway for me is that they were able to get that into the system.
Yeah, quite frankly, I was shocked when they said 120 hertz refresh rate. I was not expecting that at all. Like you, I was expecting it to either stay the same or I was like, maybe they'll hit 90. But 120 when that flashed up on the screen, I was blown away. I was like, "Oh my god, this is there." I feel like Nintendo, the sort of narrative throughout the whole Switch's generation was this thing is vastly underpowered. Um, everyone, they're talking about all these miracle ports like The Witcher and Doom Eternal. Um, and the narrative throughout the whole generation was this thing cannot run anything really well outside of Nintendo first party games. And even then, a lot of Nintendo first party games were starting to struggle. Breath of the Wild, when that released, it had a lot of frame rate issues. And then you got deeper into the generation. Recently, Echoes of Wisdom was struggling. Mario Luigi, the Brothership, games of that nature. Um, you really started to see the cracks in the foundation of the Switch One. So I think that Nintendo was so sick of hearing that narrative of power that they said, you know what, screw it, we're just gonna put a lot more power into this thing, so we don't have to hear about the power disparity between something like the Switch 2 and say if you want like a good comp, maybe like the Xbox Series S. Um, I think it's probably a little bit more capable than the Series S overall. Um, but I just think Nintendo was just like sick and tired of hearing about it. So they're like, here you go. Here's the power. Here's everything you need. We don't want to hear about it until Switch 3. So Um, that yeah, that's just my take.
Yeah, it was a and I could be remembering the order wrong, but I feel like they talked about screen size, like, they hit you with the 7.9-inch screen size, and it was like, "Yeah, we expected it to be a little bit bigger, and that was good." And then they hit you with a 1080p, and it was like, "Oh, that's great." Like, that was a sort of a wish list, but kind of expected, I think, at this
Yep.
point, but it was like, "Cool, that's great that it's confirmed." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, on top of it, here's the 120." And it was like, oh, they just, like, stepped up between, like, confirming kind of the whole wish list there.
Yeah, it was a 1-2 punch. It was a 1080, which was like, okay, that's cool. Like I think I would have been fine with like E100p honestly. But, the fact that the screen is 1080 paired with the 120 hertz, yeah, I don't think you could have asked for much more or anything at all really at that point. So,
Yeah, and I think that only confirms the the power of what we're hoping to see here. Um, if they feel confident enough that they want to put a 1080p screen natively on this thing, then they have to believe that they're able to hit that at least with their first party games pretty consistently. Even if it is with upscaling, like it's a great sign to see that they're confident enough to put those two pieces, the refresh rate and that 1080p, into the console.
yeah, I totally agree. Speaking of games, they announced a whole slew of games um at the direct. I feel like it was a little bit light on first party offerings. Let me rephrase. Any like meaningful first party offerings. It's not to say that there weren't any meaningful first party offerings, but those meaningful first party offerings were on the lighter side. So for first party offerings that were in my opinion that were meaningful, we got Mario Kart World, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment. We got another look at Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which they confirm was 4K 60 frames per second in docked mode, and then 1080p 120 frames per second in HDR support in handheld. So that was pretty impressive, I feel. We also
Agreed.
got a sneak peek at Kirby Air Riders, the first Kirby Air Riders game in over 20 years. I never played the original Kirby Air Riders or Kirby Air Ride, so I don't really know what that game is all about. It's like a Kirby racing game or whatever. I'm not familiar with it, so
I know as much as you. I would assume it's the same kind of thing, and I think that's probably why I don't know a whole lot about it.
right. Um, but with this lineup here, um, there were a couple other small games. There was a little tech demo that Nintendo is charging for. Uh, Head scratchingly, I don't understand why they're charging for this little tech demo that sort of shows off what the Switch 2 does. I think that there's a rumor out there that they were charging like $6 or something for it, which is like at that point, it's like, why don't you just have it as a packing game? But whatever. And then there was also another game that showed off the mouse capabilities, Drag X Drive, I think it was called. Um, yeah, the tech demo game, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Um, so
Which even
those
sounds like a packing game.
exactly. So it's like,
Yeah.
why if PlayStation can pack in Astro's Playroom in the PlayStation 5, that game probably costs a good amount to develop.
Mhm.
I mean, Nintendo, like, come on, just like you should have just packed in this game. But you know what? Whatever, we'll let it go. Um, Also, with the first party offerings, that I found interesting was they have enhanced versions of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom with higher frame rates and resolution. They didn't really go into how high the resolution was going to be. All they said was higher frame rates and resolution. My assumption is the frame rates are going to hit 60. The resolution's probably going to be up to 4K, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, unless they're aiming for 1440p, I it could be either of those. I think that they're both better than what exists right now,
Yep.
and we'll all be grateful for that. Um, but yeah, your guess is as good as mine on which one they choose. I know it's got the 1440p option for the Switch 2 now, so they could be targeting that to get the 60 frames.
Yeah, honestly, if they just hit 1440p and 60, like, that would make me incredibly happy because, I mean, Breath of the Wild, it ran it ran well on the Switch 1, except when you went to, the Korok Forest, and then Tears of the Kingdom, everyone I don't understand, like, I am a huge Zelda fan, I love Zelda, but I feel like everyone gave Tears of the Kingdom a pass because, like, it was such a huge achievement to get on the Switch. They're like nobody wanted to go into, like, greater detail about the frame rate and everything, but honestly, the frame rate in Tears of the Kingdom was absolutely abysmal. So, if you got that game running at 60, 1440p, I feel like, for both those games, that is, like that's what the games truly deserve is to be presented in that light, so,
Agreed. And I mean, factoring in like, is there going to be better draw distances? Is it going to be like, what are we increasing beyond just resolution and frames that are just going to make the experience uh, a little fuller?
yeah. I was watching the Treehouse Live presentation, and they sort of quickly went over um, comparisons between the Switch One version and the Switch Two versions of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. And honestly, when they brought up the comparison between the Switch One version, Switch Two version of Breath of the Wild, my jaw just dropped. I was like, "This is incredible! Like this is the way the game was meant to be played all along." So
Yep.
I'm super excited to honestly, like, I've been waiting for this, and I'm totally hopping back into Breath of the Wild. Not Tears of the Kingdom because I played it more recently, and I'm not as high on Tears of the Kingdom as a lot of people are, but Breath of the Wild, I'm definitely replaying that game from start to finish. Like one of my favorite games of all time. So, and to play it in with all the enhancements, yep, sign me up.
Yep. Should be a really good time. I think I was just surprised that it was the 1-2 punch right away. Like Breath of the Wild popped up on the screen. It was like, again, that was another one that was kind of expected. Like
Yeah,
it was great to get the confirm, and then it was instantly like, oh, also Tears of the Kingdom. It was like, whoa, okay, all right, full support on both right away is fun to
yeah,
see.
yep. Right out of the gate, yeah.
Yeah,
They could have staggered that a little bit. They could have been like, okay, we're doing Breath of the Wild now, in like 6 months to a year from now, they could have been like, and now Tears of the Kingdom is here with all the bells and whistles and the enhancements and everything. But you know what? I am super excited that they're both there. And eventually down the line, I'll probably replay Tears of the Kingdom just because if you look at the comparisons between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, Tears of the Kingdom's art style is a little bit sharper than Breath of the Wild, and the colors pop a little bit more. Um, and if anybody wants to see like what these look like, definitely go look up the Treehouse Live presentation of the side by side comparisons. But yeah, down the line, I'll probably hop into Tears of the Kingdom if there's like a lull or in game releases or anything. Um, as far as like the first party offerings in the launch, I guess I don't know where Kirby Air Riders falls in the launch sort of window, but which game are you most excited about first party in the launch window?
this is an easy one for me.
I think
This
yeah,
is this is this is a
yeah,
layup for me.
I definitely know what that is.
Metroid Prime 4 seeing the light of day in any way is exciting for me. And so
Yep.
knowing that it's getting a dedicated Switch 2 version and already like knowing that it's gonna hit some pretty high marks for resolution and frame rate and it's gonna run smoothly is just like it's the icing on top for me.
Yeah, it's incredible. They were going through all these games in Treehouse Live, but I was watching the Metroid Prime 4 footage, and that oh my god, that game looks incredible. I'm sorta happy that this game took so long to, see the light of day, just because now they have the Switch 2 version, and I feel like playing that Switch 2 version is the version that is meant to be played. Like, you can play 4K 60, 1080p, 120. This is the dream for this game. Like
Mhm.
to have that sort of fidelity and the smoothness of the frame rates and everything. I can't wait to play that game. I'm so excited.
Agreed. It's fun to see that this is the game. I know as we've gone from generation to generation, normally the crossover is with whatever new Legend of Zelda game there is. And again, we have the new the new versions of the Switch Zelda games coming over, like we just mentioned. But knowing that Twilight Princess kind of bridged the gap on a GameCube and a Wii version, but that was less about performance and more about implementing motion.
Right.
And then you had Breath of the Wild kind of crossing over between Wii U and Switch, but again, I think the Wii U was pretty powerful compared to what the Switch offered, and it wasn't as stark of a contrast. But now you're seeing, I think, probably the bigger jump and having it be Metroid, being that game that you get to kind of cross the generation with is really exciting to see.
Yeah, I think this time around, it's probably the most exciting leap of a console generation that we've had in a while, because we were stuck. I I love the Switch so much. It's my all-time favorite console. But, you got to admit it was probably around the power of like a PS3, like between a PS3 and PS4, but more so on the side of a PS3. And now you're getting you're making that jump from PS3 to above a PS4 Pro type power. Like that's really exciting. You're gonna see like a lot of interesting things that Nintendo can do with their games on the new system that they couldn't do with the Switch One. Um, I think it's gonna be just like that generational leap that we always looked forward to back in the day when you're going from like the N64 to the GameCube, or like PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, like that like wow moment of like, oh my god, look at you could see the character models are better, everything runs smoother, everything looks better overall. So I think that you're definitely gonna have that moment from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 and looking at all these games.
Yeah, I mean, it's the benefit of an iteration as opposed to the past couple generations have been like a reinvention fully of what you see where we're not adding motion, we're not adding in the gamepad from the Wii U, we're not going from the Wii U to the Switch. Like we're
Right.
taking what already works and they're improving on it. And it's very easy to make the comps from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 because at the end of the day, they're very similar, right? They're trying to do the same thing. This one's just going to do it with much, much more modern hardware.
Yeah, I think as far as power goes, like the Wii U and the Switch were pretty similar. I think the Switch is probably slightly more powerful than the Wii U, so you didn't really see that big generational leap from the Wii U to the Switch. So it's been quite a while since you've really seen any sort of meaningful power boost in generations from Nintendo. So I think this is super exciting. Like I understand that the PS5 is out there and people have been experiencing this for quite a while, and PC gaming, all that stuff. Yes, I get it. I own a PS5. I know that how good graphics can look, and frame rates and all that. But I don't know. I think it's special to have Nintendo games running at such high fidelity. And you know that Nintendo's going to take advantage of that because of that higher power, because Nintendo knows how to squeeze the most out of their hardware. And I think that's what is most special about Nintendo is they just know how to get every last drop out of their hardware and make their games just sing on whatever they put it out on. So, um,
Yeah.
just yeah.
And yeah, no, totally agree. And I think it's like the perfect timing where we know that there's a partnership in here with NVIDIA, and they're
Mhm.
able to help with upscaling. And it's like they're the company you want to have the partnership currently right now if you want to be able to optimize as well as you can. And, like, sure, this isn't putting out 4K natively. No one expects a handheld to put out 4K natively. But if
No,
they're
no.
getting right, like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and like expecting it to be as powerful on its own as a PS5, it's like, well, no, but I also wouldn't want to hold a PS5 in my hands to play it. Like
No,
that also isn't anything I want.
no.
But a little bit of magic that's going to go on with Nvidia helping out to upscale. I don't think I mean, sure, you could pick apart um, exactly what's going on the screen, but I think that if you're just sitting down to play a game and enjoy it, it's going to work enough magic in the background to be noticeable and for you to enjoy what you're doing.
Honestly, I think the power of the Switch 2 is the best case scenario because Nintendo could have done Nintendo things, and they could have been like, "Well, we're not gonna focus more, so much on power here." Like they could have done like, "We're just gonna do a 60 hertz panel for the handheld, and no, we're gonna skip on the HDR. We don't really need that." There's all these like little bonus features that they put into the system that they totally could have skipped out on. But I feel like this is really best case scenario when it comes to Nintendo. Like, who are we talking about here? It's like they have not wanted to, they dug their heels in for the past few console generations, and they're like, we don't really care about power. And rightfully so. Like they're like, well, our games are going to do the talking, and it's like, yeah, I get that to a point, but if your system doesn't have enough power to let your gains do the talking, then that's a problem. So in this case, they went all in with the power. I feel to make their games really shine, and I think you're gonna see that throughout the console generation. And I'm super excited. Yeah, it's definitely best case scenario in my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, they could have decided, hey, we're actually all about price point, and we want to actually launch a console at $300. They could have done that,
Yeah.
and it would have cut down on a lot of what the tech specs were. And obviously, we didn't get that. And like you said, best case, we got best case for what we were probably going to expect from what Nintendo was going to put out. And like Tears of the Kingdom, this is like the point is like that was maybe one of the games where they might have realized, "Hey, this isn't the vision that we had."
Yeah.
Like, we have a vision for what we want this game to be, and we're having to cut back on some things that we really wanted to include because who knows what missed that game, timing, creativity, or was it power that caused you to cut something out of the game? And maybe they were like, "We don't wanna have that happen again. We don't wanna reach the end of the Switch 2 life cycle and have to cut back on what we have in our heads for what we want the game to be."
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be the case anymore. And I think you're right. Like, I think a lot of the games suffered in some degree, maybe not in ways that the consumer really sees, but the vision of the developers. I'm sure that the power of the original Switch made them scale back their vision quite a bit. So in order to just get the game running on the original Switch, I mean, like I said, like games nearing the end of the console generation, that yeah, that system was incredibly tired. So I mean, so
Mhm.
it's really exciting to see how much thought they put into the actual power of the system.
Agreed.
Um, but moving on, another exciting announcement: GameCube games are coming exclusively to the Switch 2. The launch lineup for those on Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack is Wind Waker, Soul Calibur 2, and F Zero GX. The Monkey Paw situation with Wind Waker. They gave us Wind Waker finally, but it's not the Wind Waker version that we wanted. But I mean, at least it's there. The games look sharp. They look good. What are your thoughts on a GameCube being added to Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack?
I mean, I love it. I do. We didn't mention the fourth edition is also us getting a dedicated GameCube controller
Yes,
to
yes.
play these, and I think that's
So
that's the
excited.
most exciting thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
a loved controller by me, so it's really great to see that. Um, and it'll be the first. I didn't buy any of the other classic like Switch versions of the N64 or the Super Nintendo. It was always like on the list, but never happened. But it'll happen with GameCube because
Mhm,
it is my favorite of the older Nintendo controllers. But back to the games though, right? I I think it's great to see. And I think we knew it was probably coming.
mhm,
Um, I think that it was sort of are we going to get Wind Waker through Switch Online, or are we going to get Wind Waker through a Switch 2 version of the Wii U version of Wind Waker? Like, what are we going to see? Is it a remaster or is it something ported? And it's fun to add it to NSO, something that we already are subscribing to. It's going to be there. It's a fun addition. Um, I think I'm probably leaning towards I wish it would have been a remaster of the Wii U version, as I think most people were. Certainly, and I'm holding out hope that they didn't announce Twilight Princess for the GameCube because maybe they're working on bringing the Wii U version of Twilight Princess over. Maybe that's my biggest takeaway right now is that maybe that still exists, but knowing Nintendo, they're probably just holding that one back for a couple of months so they can put that on NSO in the fall, but which again, love that it's there. Um, love GameCube, but, hoping for that to take place with Twilight Princess.
yeah. Not gonna happen, sorry.
It's not gonna happen at all.
Do you think Nintendo considers Twilight Princess a GameCube game or a Wii game? Because I've been
Oof.
going through this in my head, I'm like, "Wait, is Twilight Princess coming to the GameCube NSO or not?" What does Nintendo consider Twilight Princess, you know? What category does that fall under? Because it came out at the tail end of the GameCube. I think they delayed it like a week or 2. They launched it for the Wii a week or 2 before the GameCube version came out, and the bulk of the sales of Twilight Princess was on the Wii. I think it
Yep.
was like I think Twilight Princess's sales was like 8 million or so, and a bulk of them were Wii sales. So, in my head, I'm like, "You guys probably consider that a Wii game, don't you?"
That's a really great point, and they put all the time into adding in motion controls,
Right.
and the Switch still has motion controls with the ch so they're probably like, "This is gonna be great. We're gonna put it when we add Wii games to NSO, and it's gonna be the leading title there because
Yeah.
all the investment in all our
Yeah.
past investments in motion is gonna be coming back."
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
they put out a roadmap of GameCube games coming to Nintendo Switch Online, such as Fire Emblem, the GameCube version. I forget like the subtitle, Fire Emblem,
Path of Radiance.
Path of Radiance. Thank you.
Yep.
Mario Sunshine, Pokemon Coliseum 1 and 2, and a bunch of others. So they laid out a timeline for a bunch more GameCube games coming to NSO, so that's exciting, and I'm sure that they'll continue to update their offerings of all the other crap that they have. I think Nintendo Switch Online, it really turned into a great service. When the expansion pack was first introduced, people were like, this isn't great. There's only a couple things there," but they've added a ton of stuff to it over the years, and I think only recently they've taken stuff away. They took away some obscure Super NES games, but overall, like they've never taken away any other games that I can really think of. Um, so I think the value is definitely there to play all these retro or classic Nintendo games. My only gripe with the service is Um, Sony allows you to buy their classic games a la carte that's on their PlayStation Plus Premium, but Nintendo doesn't allow you to do that. So that's my only gripe with the service. Other than like you have to say subscribe to the system, and I should mention that also those enhanced versions of Breath of the Wild: Tears of the Kingdom will be included in the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So if you're signed up for that, you don't have to buy those versions separately. And we don't know the upgrades are going to be priced at. People are thinking $10. But if you're subscribed to the Nintendo Switch online expansion pack, those will be in there for you. Just wanted to shout that out. But also in the direct, a bunch of third party games were announced. I'm just gonna run through this list real quick and just stop me if anything really sticks out to you, or we could just run through the list and sort of call out a couple of games. But Elden Ring was announced, Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition was also announced, which that game is getting people went hands on at the Switch 2 experience and they played Cyberpunk 2077 and CD Projekt, they were saying that it took them 7 weeks in-house to develop the Switch 2 version of Cyberpunk 2077, and they're targeting a performance mode of 40 FPS, which is I think is pretty good for a handheld. I mean, in my
Mhm.
opinion. I mean, I don't it doesn't run that well on the Steam Deck, correct? It only runs at 30 on the Steam Deck or no?
You
Can you
you could do a s yeah, because yeah, you could do a similar, like, 30, 40 if you want.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd call it a quality mode on Steam Deck, but if you want a more quality mode was 30, and then, you could kinda squeeze 40 out of it if you were, choosy with what you what kinda settings you wanted, which was low or lower, essentially.
Right. Okay. But still, still impressive for a handheld, system, in my opinion.
Agreed. Oh, yeah.
Um, Hades 2, I believe it's, um, it's dropping exclusively for Nintendo Switch 2 at first. I think that's what they said, or I read that somewhere. I'm not 100% sure, if somebody wants to correct that.
It would
Yeah,
make sense because that's what Hades 1 did, right?
I believe so. I think Hades 1 launched on Switch first and then other platforms later on. So I think they're taking the same approach with Hades 2. Um, they didn't give like a definitive launch date for Hades 2, but I am so incredibly excited for Hades 2. Big fan of Hades 1, one of my all-time favorite games. Um, so Hades 2 launching on the Switch 2. Um, I'm totally there for it. I know you're a big fan of Hades as well, so that's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I've
Um,
been holding off on getting in on the early access just mainly because, I was hoping it was coming to Switch too, so, like, now it's like, "Okay, the wait's been worth it."
yep,
As much as I wanna jump in, I'll wait for it to launch on Switch 2 first.
yep. Hollow Knight Silk Song showed up for about 5
Got
seconds
its 3 seconds in the spotlight, there you go.
with the promise that it's going to launch in 2025. Whether or not they actually make that date is up in the air. I'll believe it when I see it. Other notable games that are coming to the system, Street Fighter 6, I believe, is on launch. Final Fantasy 7 Remake Intergrade. They didn't give a date for that, but they said that's coming to the system. Split Fiction is also coming at launch. Project 007, that James Bond game from IO Interactive. They did a brief teaser for that game that's coming to the Switch too, which is pretty promising that current gen games are able to come over to the system. I think that's super cool, and yeah, I think that's gonna. Uh, I think you're gonna see a lot more current gen games on the Switch 2, more so than the Switch One with the current gen of PS4 or Xbox One. Um, Hitman World of Assassination is coming. EA Sports, I think they said yeah, Football Club, whatever the latest year is, and then Madden's gonna come as well. Civ 7's coming with a Switch 2 version, a new Daemon X Machina game, Titanic Scion. I never played the first one. The first one looked cool, but when this trailer popped up in the direct, I was like, "Is that Daemon X Machina?" And then some like words flash over the screen. I was like, "Oh, I guess not." And then at the end of the trailer, it was like, "Nope, this is a new Daemon X Machina game." I was like, "Oh shit."
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. Yakuza Zero Director's Cut, Borderlands 4, another current gen game coming to the Nintendo Switch 2, Tony Hawk 3 and 4, Star Wars Outlaws, and Hogwarts Legacy. I think those were the biggest games, third party, that were listed for the Nintendo Switch 2. Also, From Software is making an original game exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2, the Duskbloods. It's a PvPvE game. Um, a little bit different. They seem to be leaning into multiplayer a lot lately. I'm not quite sure why. The game looks cool. Shane, you got up and ran around so excited when this game was when the trailer was playing for this game. Um, so how are you feeling about the third party lineup for the Nintendo Switch 2? How are you feeling about the Dustbloods being an exclusive for the Switch 2? Talk to me about your feelings.
Sure, sure. I think, yeah, I got up and ran around. So the trailer started and there was no context, and we were watching it together, and I was like, everything in my brain tells me this is Bloodborne 2. Everything about what's going on, what's being said, what it looks like, and the screen cuts to black and it pops up FromSoft. And yeah, I got up and ran around because I was like, "Yep, they're gonna give us Bloodborne 2 on the Switch because Sony won't is for whatever reason doesn't want to acknowledge that Bloodborne exists." So they went around Sony and said, "Yeah, Nintendo, we're going to do it with you instead." And then obviously it's not Bloodborne 2. It's the Dustbloods, and they're again leaning into more of a multiplayer focus. I think for me, is that less exciting than an exclusive single player FromSoft game? Yeah, but do I think that there's some potential here for it to be a good game? Also, yes, like I love that sort of like um gothic horror sort of vibe that it's going for, and that's different than what they have with Elden Ring. It's kind of why I like Bloodborne more. Um and maybe it's that they weren't going to get, I know we've got the new Elden Ring Night Rain game coming out on other platforms. That one doesn't seem like it's coming to Switch, so maybe this is them just trying something else, from that same team at FromSoft. I'm sure they got different teams working on different things. And maybe they're just trying out what makes, my hope is that they're just trying to see what makes the most sense for multiplayer. And, maybe they've got another single player game, obviously, that they're working on. Um, but this one's interesting, knowing that it's not going to be a what's wow, what is Night Rain? A Souls like? Not a Souls like. I'm so sorry.
Uh, it's a
I've
it's
I've
a
I've blanked.
it's a 3-player yeah,
Roguelike.
roguelike. Yes, exactly. Sorry, I
Yeah,
couldn't think of it
Souls
either.
like
I was
popped
like,
in my head. Wow. Yeah, yeah. It's roguelike, and this one's gonna be
yeah,
more, I don't know what this one's like. I mean, I don't know if we see much. We really don't know how they're gonna implement the PvPvE in here, and
no,
what is the structure, and is it like you jump in a game and play, it's like a 10-minute round, 30-minute round? Like, is it round based, or is it more of gonna be like an open world-ish, um, is there still gonna be an adventure to it? I don't think we really know a whole lot at this point.
yeah,
Um, but
hard to
certainly
tell.
excited. The exclusivity on Switch 2 probably interests me the most,
Hmm.
but we know that that's next year. But yeah, that was a
Yep.
big one for them to get that. I mean, like, it's way more, the whole list you went through is comparing this third party support to Switch One. Like, there was no Switch One third party support at all.
Yeah, very little out of the gate, honestly. Like there was a little bit there, but I think people were just they were terrified to support it because of the Wii U, and rightfully so. And as the generation went on, they started seeing more third party support. But I think people are all these publishers and developers, they're like, yeah, screw it. We're going to be there day one. And I think it's evidenced by this huge list of games, like big games, not just like these little piddly indie games. Like, no disrespect to indie games, there's a lot of terrific ones out there, but you know, this list of games that are coming, it's impressive in my opinion. So
Yeah, I mean, the developers have to put in effort to make an optimized Switch 2 version where, to your point, indie games don't need as much optimization to run on Switch hardware,
yep.
um, with them just being what they are. Uh, yeah, I don't know. It's great to see from the start. And you're right. As Switch went on, it was better. I guess it was more of a remembering how bare the Switch 1 launch window was with third party was just there just wasn't anything there. And
Yeah.
this is super exciting to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely promising, and I'm this is probably the biggest third party support they've ever had out of the gate, really, dating back to probably the Super NES. So, I mean, and it might be the strongest third party support of all time, of any of their systems. So yeah, that's definitely exciting to see. But moving on, there's a lot of talk about the Steam Deck, how the Switch 2 matches up against handheld PCs, and whether or not that's a fair comparison is up for debate, because I feel like handheld PCs are in their own sort of sect of gaming. It's a very niche sort of sect of that. But in your opinion, Shane, how does the Switch 2 stack up against, say, the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, all these different handheld PCs? I know that uh, you know all these different systems have all their different specs and everything. I'm not the most intelligent when it comes to specs for all these systems, so I know you know a little bit more than I do. So, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I know barely more than you, but enough for us to chat about how, how we feel them stacking up and about I think the probably the biggest takeaway and a really exciting takeaway is Switch 1 came out and really kind of like paved the way for, hey, handheld gaming isn't dead. People want to play handheld gaming. Not that I'm saying it was, but like it brought it into a more mainstream space.
Hmm.
And then I think you saw Valve with the Steam Deck and Asus with the Ally and all these other companies say, "Hey, we want to throw our hat in the ring there." And because of the success they saw with the Switch 1, and I think that that happened and you saw the support of all the developers having to now optimize their game to get their Steam green check mark saying that you could play it on the Steam Deck, which
Yeah,
is big. And I think that you saw um, specifically with Asus, they just kind of try to push the power of the handheld console more. I know Steam Deck, it's similar to Nintendo where you're kind of buying into their ecosystem and you know that it's gonna work. They're more about the specs aren't quite as high, but what we're
sure.
putting out, we're trying to push is gonna work. Whereas Asus and the others are like, this thing's powerful. And I think that the Switch 2 is now benefiting from greater support for a handheld market than there was when the Switch 1 launched. And that's why we're able to see all these, cranked up specs and Nvidia is like, yeah, we're giving full support. It's whatever they said, 10 times more powerful than the Switch 1. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that they owe each other um uh, I mean, they just at the end of the day, they owe each other for what each one was able to do, to get us to the point where the Switch 2 is what it's going to be, um, and with there being that much support. And yeah, I mean, not digging into the specs, I think the Switch lives somewhere at the end of the day is going to live somewhere between a Steam Deck and the top end, more niche handhelds that are built around that pure power, which is great. Like, I mean, I think that they're finally playing in the space successfully where they want to play.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I don't know, in my mind, uh looking at like comparison videos online, and like I said, I don't know with a super ton about specs and power and all this stuff. Um but it does seem like the Switch 2 is sort of in line with the Steam Deck, which is pretty exciting. Just because you get that streamlined experience, that tailored experience on console. And I know that Scene does a good job of making that tailored experience as well, and you don't have to sort of like finick with a lot of things and everything. So I get that, but I don't know. There's just like the fact that a Nintendo console finally has some sort of power after years and
Yeah,
years and years of not wanting to play in that space at all.
yeah,
Since really the GameCube, they haven't played in that space. But it's really exciting, and yeah, I think the most exciting prospect is how much juice are they Nintendo first party gonna get out of this system. They're gonna squeeze every single drop that they can, and that's a totally exciting prospect. All these games that they currently have for their launch window lineup, Donkey Kong looks great, Mario Kart looks amazing, Metroid Prime looks mind blowing, Hyrule Warriors. I know that Age of Calamity ran like garbage on the Switch One. I know that because I played 60 hours of it. Although I had a great time, um, it did not run well, and Age of Imprisonment is an exciting prospect because to have a game like that running well, I yeah, I cannot wait, honestly. So,
yeah.
uh,
Totally agree. I think yeah, it's I think at the end of the day, we get all this third party support because we've seen these other handheld PCs pull it off. And so the developers are like, yeah, we can make a version that runs on Switch because we know it runs on Steam Deck or
yep,
whatever, which is great. I think that's already there. It already exists. We can optimize. And then yeah, of course, Nintendo is gonna that's probably where you're gonna see the step above Steam Deck is on these games that are like created specifically for Switch 2 by Nintendo, only a Nintendo version.
yep,
You're gonna see that kind of step up. And Steam Deck is 3 years old at this point, which isn't super old, but Nintendo's getting 2025 hardware with current NVIDIA support that seems like their support and their abilities grow daily. So like it's a bigger, I think, step up from that support um, than what you're gonna see on Steam Deck.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, to sort of end this chat, we're gonna end on a more somber note. With the reveal of the Switch, in the presentation didn't have anything about pricing or anything, and we were sitting there sort of scratching our heads like, why isn't there any pricing or anything? Like, how much is this thing? About an hour, maybe like a half hour later, Nintendo sent out a press release of the pricing of all these games and the system. The price of the system's coming in at 449, so it's $150 more than the original Switch launched at. Uh, you can pay 499 if you want the Mario Kart bundle, which you might want to do that because Mario Kart World is $80. So there's been a lot of backlash about the price of Mario Kart World and wondering if this is going to be the standard for Switch 2 games. I don't think so because Donkey Kong is priced at 70, but also you have the $80 for the Kirby upgrade, which includes some new content. But it is $80 for the Kirby upgrade. Also, if you want the Switch 2 version of Tears of the Kingdom, that's going to run you $80. But Tears of the Kingdom on Switch 1 was 70, and that leads me to believe that the upgrade for Switch 2 is going to be $10 more if you have the Switch 1 version. Um, Breath of the Wild is also $70 now, so there's a little bit more evidence that these upgrades are going to be $10 for Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. But overall, what are your thoughts about the price point of the Switch 2 being at 449? Personally, I was a little taken aback just because in my head I planned for 400, but the more and more I think about it and the economic reality paired with the power that they packed into the system, 449 seems appropriate. What is your take on the price for the Switch 2?
Yeah, no, I think it was very much it adjusted quickly for me expectations once we saw those specs at the beginning of the direct. And I think for me it was always again playing more into the current handheld space, like handheld PC space. It was like, I mean, based on what they say for specs, you get handheld PCs are 400 to 900 or $1,000 for some of these more
Yeah.
expensive ones where it's like, all right, if we want to compete here, and again, not that Switch competes with $1,000, we're not saying that, but like anywhere in between wouldn't be unrealistic, right? And you're paying to get into, Nintendo's first party games, which I think is something you can't get anywhere else. And if you're thinking about them um, launching a new system, you've got a smaller install base of the system. Maybe they're thinking that I don't know. Pricing on games, I think, is a very separate conversation.
Yeah.
I think pricing on the console for me was not super surprising, and you probably could have gone up to 5 or 550 for me, and still could have seen it making sense.
I think 550. Yeah, that would have been a yeah,
You wouldn't
that
have
would have been
liked it.
yeah, I
You
would
would
have
not
liked
have
it. Yeah, yeah.
liked it.
That would have been a tough pill to swallow. I still would have been there, but I feel like 450 it's like, yeah, okay, that's probably the sweet spot.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's a great price, really.
the
Um,
conversation about the $80 for Mario Kart though, um, I just I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. The fact that we're going up 10 more dollars for gains when we just went to $70 for gains a generation ago. Um, but I get it to a point. Um, but yeah, $80 it doesn't feel great. So, what's your take on on the $80 Mario Kart price?
I feel I probably feel less. I don't know. I feel less um, negative energy towards it. Obviously, I'd love for games to be $10, right? And I think a jump of $10 over, the 70 that we just saw happen recently is a little surprising. But again, if first party games cost a little bit more, they're only available on Switch. So you're going to only see them sold through Switch. And if you want to pay to be in that space, that's what it's going to cost. And like, I don't love that mentality. But if you want to play other games, most other games are available about everywhere. Even we're seeing Sony and Xbox like put their games on PC. They're able to get them, across all these different platforms, and even Xbox is coming to PlayStation. So everyone's kind of putting their stuff everywhere. So you're going to sell more copies. If Nintendo looks at it and they're like, well, the only way we're going to sell copies is through our Switch 2 hardware, then maybe you have to pay a slight premium to get the game because they're not getting it on volume. Again, not super pro consumer, but not unrealistic for me at the end of the day. And how many of these games are really gonna like they're not putting out Nintendo first party games. They're not putting 10 out a month. So you're not gonna spend $800 a month. It could be one every other month and you're paying to get into the Switch. Are you okay paying $10 more for the games that you were getting into that ecosystem for? I'm still settling on how I feel, I think.
Yeah, it's tough. Overall, you're gonna pay it. Like Nintendo's gonna get you one way or another. I think overall games are gonna be 70, and there's gonna be very few $80 games that are releasing for the system. So
But yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, it's Nintendo has always kind of been that premium space. Um, they're that weird balance between being kid friendly and premium at the same time, which
Mhm.
is sometimes like, well, where do you want to take the conversation and how do you want to think about it? Where like, oh, it should be cheaper because they're catered towards kids, but at the same time, they optimize things so well for their console that are you paying the premium for that extra level of effort? And I can see both sides, and we don't know how many games are going to be $80.
Yeah.
It might not be very many, and I think
I
70 is such a standard that that's not overly surprising to me.
yeah, I think it'll be a handful of games. I think by the end of the console generation, there will probably be 10 $80 games compared to I think there was a list that went out, I saw a couple days ago, and there was over 120 Nintendo published first party games on the Switch. So, if 10 of those games, even 15 of those games are $80, that's a very small fraction of the games that are that actually hit that price point.
Sure.
So I don't think at the end of the day, I don't think it's gonna end up being this huge deal. Will you see the next Zelda game at $80? Yes. The next 3D Mario game, are you gonna see at $80? Also, yes. But games like a 2D Mario or like a 2D Donkey Kong or like a top-down Zelda or something like that, I think you're gonna see those games at probably 70, maybe even less. 60 maybe,
Sure.
who knows?
Yeah.
I think Nintendo's gonna explore the full spectrum of pricing. So, I think overall, like, do I love it? No, but I don't think like, at the end of the day, I don't think $80 is gonna be a huge deal. But speaking of a huge deal and the 449 price tag,
Mm.
all these I don't know if Nintendo ever came out and announced it themselves, but all these retailers came out and said that the pre-orders for Nintendo Switch 2 was supposed to go live this Wednesday, which was the 9th, I believe.
Yep.
And now that's being delayed due to the economic or not the economic, but the whatever you want to call it, the
The
governmental intervention of I don't know, whatever you wanna call it.
the
Trump's ta
impending tariffs.
Yeah, the impending tariffs, Trump's tariffs on every country known to man. Um, Nintendo decided to delay the pre-order situation, due to the evolving situation with the tariffs and the uncertainty, that surrounds that situation. I know that Nintendo sort of move manufacturing of their systems out of China to Vietnam, and Trump decided to slap a 46% tariff on Vietnam. There's currently negotiations in place between the two countries to reduce that tariff or get it removed completely. At the end of the day, I don't think that the tariffs are going to affect the price of the system. I think that um, a resolution is gonna uh uh come, and I don't think it's gonna end up affecting it, although it's making a lot of people nervous. And the 449 price tag is a lot already. I think at the end of the day, we're not gonna we're gonna go through this upcoming week and we're not going to hear anything. But the week after, I think, is when the pre-orders are going to go live, and it's not going to affect the price at all. I don't know what your thoughts are, but that's where I stand.
Yeah, I mean, it's a certainly is affecting tech greatly, and I know that like the timing on this with Switch is one of the more timely and like noticeable impacts. So uh, I don't think I have a solid idea on where I think everything's going to go. I know that it's probably going to come down to there's a country that's going to settle in on making some kind of agreement and deal, and that's going to kind of lead to it's going to be a domino where you're going to see everyone kind of fall in afterward. When that happens, I don't know. Who's first? I don't know. But I know a lot of tech companies, like you said, moved their production out of China specifically for this reason.
Yep.
And I don't think that anyone saw, all these other countries getting hit as aggressively as they are in their plan. So I think that that's going to force some hands somewhere. And so do I think it's going to impact the Switch pricing? Probably not. Could we see a 10% increase? Maybe. Like maybe we do, and maybe it's $500 and 550. I would think that's probably a worst case scenario.
Yep.
If we're if we're talking about worst case scenario in the Nintendo Switch launch world, if we're
Yeah.
zooming in really granular here, I think that that's probably a worst case scenario that we're going to see. But I would love to be optimistic enough to think that they're just making sure that they don't have to do that, like you said. And we're going to see some news in the coming weeks that say, all right, here's the new date. It's still the same price.
Yeah. I think ultimately that's what it's gonna end up being. Just yeah, I it is disheartening a little bit, but I think
Sure.
that we just need to take a step back, take a breath, and just wait for this all to play out. And I think at the end of the day, it's gonna be exactly as it was announced originally, 449, 499 with Mario Kart. And I think it'll work out. So I'm not gonna be too worried.
Yeah, I mean, I think price aside, right? I think that everything. I really think everything that we got out of the direct and out of all the news we've gotten from tree houses in the past couple days really are nothing but positives. The only negative I'm seeing is price of games, even more than price of console, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and so if that's the worst complaint that we're seeing out of a Nintendo launch, like, and it's like they're finally giving you the tech to compete, and the price is going to be more. So it's like, okay, what do we actually want here? If you wanted to compete specs wise, it's going to cost a little bit more. And if everything you like about the specs is great, that's that's a fantastic launch in my or a fantastic announcement in my opinion.
yeah. I agree. But I think we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you for joining us for episode 1 of Wicked Awesome Nintendo, and we will see you next time on episode 2. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.
Bye everyone.